Chris, before we hit the record button, we were talking about stockbrokers versus how freight brokers work. And stockbrokers for a long time kind of had different approach to doing business. They would get paid by the transaction, and sometimes they would churn accounts, and they were kind of, their interests weren't necessarily our interests. Freight brokers, for the most part, aren't doing that. But there's sometimes a sense that the carrier is getting ripped off, and that's why we want this transparency. But I think the industry is kind of moving to a more transparent model anyway. We don't necessarily need the government's help in doing that. There's a lot of big logistics companies that say, we are doing managed freight. I'm working with Chris. He's got $10 million and we're charging him this much money for the management, and we're giving him, here's what the carrier paid. Here's what we paid for every one of these transactions. Here's the fees you paid to us. We can be as transparent as we want in our supply chains. We don't need the government telling us you have to do it. That's not particularly useful. And it feels to me like we're just adding an extra layer of bureaucracy that's maybe not necessary.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of regulations that have come out over the years. I think the one that's just kind of popping in my brain is dealing with the 34-hour restart provision for trucking companies, where the federal government was basically telling truck drivers, "Hey, this is when you should rest. This is when you should restart."
That doesn't even work.
Yeah, and we look at the kind of same way. To your point, Joe, is that if people want to be, if brokers want to be completely transparent, open the books, have at it. I mean, obviously that's your business, that's your prerogative. But our point is, we don't want the federal government stepping in, private contract negotiations, stepping in and mandating this transparency dated on a piece of regulation that's quite frankly outdated, unnecessary, and burdensome from in certain instances when the shipper is required to pass down confidentiality agreements, and therefore our members are required to pass those forward to trucking companies.
Yep. You had an analogy about somebody refinishing your basement. Please tell us that one.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of equated to that when looking at this issue is, when let's say I'm going to refinish my basement. I'm going to work with a general contractor we're going to agree to a price, and he's going to come in and he's going to do the work. He doesn't disclose to me, he or she doesn't disclose to me on what he paid or she paid the plumber or the electrician or the drywall specialist. That's his prerogative, that's his business, and that's the margins that he's got to operate within his business. At the time in 1980, when this regulation was put out that the folks point towards, brokers were a commission sales agent. And the Interstate Commerce Commission was concerned, what they called illegal freight rebating. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but essentially they were concerned that shippers and brokers would be the same owner and kind of, pushing loads, obviously, to themselves and then get paid a commission on that. So there was talk of sharing financial information. Everyone was part of the same transaction, similar to like a real estate agent. Brokers don't operate that way anymore. It's done on two separate business transactions, one with shippers, one with trucking companies.